Hello, this is Good Morning Transfers. Bayern Munich leave London without a deal in place to sign Harry Kane. For now, at least, we've got latest on the Tottenham striker's future. Arsenal ramp up their efforts to add a new goalkeeper to their squad with David Raya a target. What's happening at Chelsea too? Could Romelu Lukaku's time at the club be over? Plus news of another potential incoming from a Premier League team to come. A very good morning to everyone at home and those watching on the Sky Sports Premier League YouTube channel. And good morning to James Savundra, Sam Obaseki and Olivia Bazaglo. Right, we kick off with Harry Kane. A significant gap in valuation remain between Bayern Munich and Tottenham, believed to be about £20 million. The two clubs held talks in London yesterday discussing a potential move for the striker. Now, it's our understanding that Bayern are ready to pay a maximum of £100 million for Kane, which is around about £85 million. Tottenham, though, want £100 million. Right, James, just talk us through what happened so far this summer.
Well, so far this summer, Kane has reported back for pre-season training on time this year, which he didn't do back in 2021 when heavily linked with a move to Manchester City. And we know he's got 1 year left on his contract. And he has no intention of signing a new contract this summer, at least. Yesterday, Bayern Munich and Tottenham, their representatives held talks. They had a lunch in central London, negotiations ongoing, and Bayern are prepared to pay a maximum of €100 million for Kane. That would blow their transfer record apart, €90 million plus €10 million in add-ons. But Spurs want £100 million. So the gap in evaluation that they have is around £15 to £20 million at the moment, which is quite significant. Sky Germany are reporting that Bayern are keen to finalise the deal this week, and Kane remains open to speaking to Bayern Munich if Spurs agree a deal, and Bayern are convinced that he wants to sign for them this summer. And interestingly, Tottenham will insist on a buyback clause if Kane is to return to the Premier League. But should no move take place, Kane is expected to be part of Tottenham's team to take on Brentford next Sunday. The season coming rapidly towards us now, and Kane's future is still very much up in the air.
Yeah, we will talk about that buyback clause in a moment. But everybody at home, it looks like the issue at the moment is the price between Bayern Munich and Tottenham for Harry Kane. So everyone at home, hashtag transfer talk, what you think Harry Kane is worth right now with a year left on his contract, being the superb striker that he is. So hashtag transfer talk with a figure there. But as Olivia, so we know that Bayern Munich have gone, their delegation, I suppose, have gone back to Germany. What happens now?
I mean, obviously, like James says, there is a difference in valuation, but sometimes we know clubs say they have a stance and say they have a number, but it doesn't often take long for two clubs to agree a fee. Obviously, this is a big fee for a big player, so it could take a little bit longer. My thought is that I always thought Harry Kane would go this summer. That was what I always thought Daniel Levy would do. My only thought is that how long do Spurs want to let this carry on? Because there is a chance that Bayern go the whole way through this August month saying they're not going to meet what Spurs want, and then they do the second to last day of the transfer window. Then what happens? Then what do Spurs do? They're left with 2 days to try and find a replacement for Harry Kane. So, you know, whether it'll take long, we don't know. But in my head, I think that Bayern and Spurs will probably reach an agreement at some point during this month, and I think Harry Kane will be a Bayern player.
This thing is, Bayern Munich haven't pulled out yet, despite the gap in valuation. Tottenham haven't pulled out, despite the gap in valuation. So what does that say? These negotiations are still going on?
I think it means that, you know, Spurs are willing to sell and Bayern obviously feel like they're the favourites. I think there will probably be more pressure on them if there were other teams that were interested and willing to pay that exact price. PSG said that they're interested, but only if Bayern, if it looked like Bayern were going to come out of the race. And I think Spurs currently are quite reluctant and probably hoping that Harry Kane, you know, has a change of heart and he says maybe he wants to sign a new contract. But I think it's pretty obvious now that he doesn't want to sign that contract. He wants to challenge for trophies right now. He feels like he's in the prime of his career, 30 goals last season, 30 years old as well. And I think in the state of his career now, if any team that he goes to, he's going to help them challenge for whatever trophy that they want. So I think they're willing they're willing to, you know, sell him, but for the price that they want. But I do agree with Liv. I think if they wait out too long, they do have Richarlison in the wings that is obviously waiting for his opportunity to start up front, and he has been done pretty well during pre-season. But at the same time, you'd still want someone else to come in, and they're just giving themselves not that much time to do so.
I think Bayern's stance is they've got a strong hand here, I think, because Spurs are only willing to sell at the price they want to sell him for, but what they simply don't want to do is let him go to a Premier League rival this year, and they certainly don't want him to go to a Premier League rival for free next summer. So that's why these talks are ongoing at the moment. I mean, it would be a disaster for Spurs if they were to lose Harry Kane at this point now, and it does feel like if they are going to sell him, get it done now so at least Ange Postecoglou has time to move forward, because if it happens before the start of the season, if it happens during the season, it's just a total disaster. And a manager shouldn't be put in that situation coming to a new club, which Ange Postecoglou is going to find. Nuno Espirito Santo found it 2 years ago with that uncertainty. But that is why these talks are still ongoing, because Spurs simply don't want to be in a position where Harry Kane is lying up against them this season or next season.
Yeah, so the fee is the stumbling block, and people at home are getting in touch. John says that Kane is worth £70 million right now, not a penny more. Craig Roberts says £65 million because he's 30 years old in the last year of his contract. But Luke, though, says he is worth £100 million. He gets you 25 plus league goals guaranteed. Fair points from everyone there. But this buyback clause has been interesting us all morning, hasn't it, Sam? Can you see why Tottenham would put that in?
Yeah, of course. They don't want to see him line up against them, like we've all said. But at the same time, I think at this point, they just need to, you know, I'd say it's hard to move on from a club legend, but at the same time, I feel like you don't want the Harry Kane saga to just be following you for years to come. You know, you want to get the money that he's worth, you know, 100 million with 1 year left on his contract at the age of 30. That's a lot of money, and Bayern do seem like they're likely to pay that. I think after that, putting a buyback clause in for someone that is over the age of 30, I don't think I've ever seen that in world football. I don't think it's ever happened. So, yes, you can have that, and maybe it will work out in the future, but will that stop the growth of other players that you potentially bring in who will be doing really well at Spurs? I think it's just the love that they have for him. They just want to still have that attachment. Are
they maybe hoping that after 2-3 years at Bayern Munich that maybe Harry Kane will come back to Tottenham and finish his career back at Spurs? Is that what Spurs
the goal
are
scoring
hoping
record
for?
As well?
Yeah, maybe that is what they're hoping for. Who knows?
But does it just show, though, Olivia, that they're desperate for him to not go to another Premier League club ever? All right, we're talking about a few years' time, but the worry is that he could actually go to one only next summer if they can't get this deal done. Yeah,
James said it. I think every Spurs fan out there will be praying that he doesn't go to another Premier League club, because we know what Harry Kane can do. We've seen it at Spurs for years and years, and you can completely understand it. You don't want your star man, your star striker, going and breaking the all-time Premier League goal-scoring record at another club. You don't want him going on to lift a trophy, something which he hasn't done at Spurs, with another Premier League club. So I can completely understand Spurs' stance from it, and they're doing everything in their power to, if they do sell, to not have him play for another Premier League club ever. I get it. I completely get it.
William's been in touch saying that £85 million is a good deal for everybody concerned, for Bayern Munich, for Tottenham and for Harry Kane as well. But James, this buyback, it is fascinating. I can't think of many times where people have ever... Lots of times where the clause has been in a player's contract. I can't think of many times where it's been activated.
It's a good point what Sam mentioned as well. Usually you see buyback clause being used to give the club a bit of security if the player then goes on to shine elsewhere, and it gives them the opportunity to bring him back. But a player over the age of 30 it's not something you really see. And there's not many examples of them really being activated. Two that spring to mind: Real Madrid letting Alvaro Morata go to Juventus back in 2014, had 2 really successful years there, but then they were able to bring him back for just €10 million more than what they sold him for, a fee that they'd agreed when they'd sold him 2 years before. And of course they made a massive profit when he went to Chelsea a couple of years later. And then I think one that took a lot of people by surprise was when Gerard Deulofeu was brought back by Barcelona, despite the fact he was seeming to slip down the pecking order at Everton. Everton had sent him out on loan to AC Milan the season before, but Barcelona brought him back, and that didn't really work out. But a few that are worth keeping an eye on in the future: Tino Livramento. Chelsea put a buyback option in on him, which we believe becomes active this summer, heavily linked with Newcastle. Whether or not Chelsea look to entertain that this summer, we're not hearing any talk of that. Romeo Lavia, Manchester City put in a buyback clause, but we understand that's not going to be active until next summer, and he's been linked with a number of top 6 clubs. And then also Chelsea inserted a £64 million buyback option on Tammy Abraham when they sold him. I'm not sure that offers value for money now. If he has another good season at Roma, then maybe that's something that Chelsea consider. But yeah, Harry Kane having a buyback option is quite crazy when you consider he'd probably be 31, 32 at least by the time that they'd be able to activate that.
Yeah, and how much would it be as well? How much would that buyback?
That's a great point.
Would it be half of what Bayern Munich paid for it? Like, will you pay, let's say, 45 million for a 33-year-old striker just so he doesn't go to another club? I think it doesn't sound right to me.
You think it's just once they've sold him, just to let him go?
Yeah, just you have the memories there. He's done so much for your club. He's a top goal scorer for your club. You know, he's done everything he can. He got to a Champions League final. Once he moves on, you've got the memories. Just move on.
Yeah. There must be some caveats to it, I'd say. Sam, you were in yesterday when asked this question. So James, Olivia, this one's to you, and it is a tough one. How on earth do Tottenham go about replacing Harry Kane if he goes?
Well, the natural option would be, in the short term, Richarlison, who simply didn't have the season that he'd have wanted. His first season at Spurs, just one Premier League goal. But we've got to bear in mind, this was the Brazil number 9 at the World Cup. So he clearly is a very good player, 20 goals for Brazil already. And Son didn't have the season that he'd have expected last year as well. Bear in mind, he was a joint Golden Boot winner the season before. Just 10 goals last season in the Premier League. And it's going to be so difficult to replace him. We've seen Manchester United this summer, the difficulties they've had trying to find a number 9, and Spurs at this point in the window, for them to find a Harry Kane replacement, it seems something which is not going to be possible for them to do. But looking at the way that Ange Postecoglou plays, actually Richarlison is probably a more natural fit to his style of football than Harry Kane, because he's after a relentless pressing centre forward, and we saw that with Kyogo last season, 34 goals in all competitions. But whenever he was asked about him, Ange Postecoglou spoke about his pressing, his hard work, which is what you're going to get from Richarlison. He's had such a difficult start to life at Spurs. A lot of that was due to the relationship he seemed to have with Antonio Conte. But hopefully a fresh leaf for him. I know Spurs fans will probably want us to say they need to sign another striker, but I think realistically, Richarlison would probably be the man they'd have to go in with as their number 9 and rely on the goals from Maddison and Son to support him.
Yeah, I mean, he's irreplaceable, isn't he, when you think of Harry Kane, and not just the goals, because he offers you way more than goals. He's almost changed the way that a number 9 is played. And it depends what, like you say, what Ange Postecoglou wants from his number 9. I know one name that Spurs, it's been reported Spurs have been linked with is Brennan Johnson, who does fit that type of player who likes to press. He won't stop running. He never gives up, Brennan Johnson. But again, after Forest stayed in the Premier League, are they going to let him go? If they do, it's going to be for a decent amount of money. Matis Tell as well, who actually is a buy-in player. Now, Thomas Tuchel has used him mainly as a bench player, but he is explosive, he's quick, he is, again, the sort of player that probably Ange Postecoglou would like. And it was being reported that maybe he might be included in the deal for Kane, just to make it a little bit sweeter for Spurs. But really, when you think of the players, it's going to be so difficult to replace Harry Kane, and it's going to be a decision that's going to have to be long and hard, thought about from Spurs, because you don't just lose the goals, you lose assists, you just lose so much more than just goal scoring from Harry Kane. Yeah,
with that Matisse Tell one, it's imagine when they sold Berbatov to Manchester United and got Fraser Campbell back on loan for the season as well. It might be quite similar there. And it was Daniel Levy who did that deal too. Right, OK, so that is Tottenham on the way. Our focus turns to Arsenal. Over £200 million spent already in this window. Will there be more incomings for Mikel Arteta? Welcome back. Arsenal have spent over £200 million this summer, but could their spending spree continue before the end of the window? For more on this, AFTV presenter James Bayliss joins us now. James, good morning to you. Arsenal are interested in signing a goalkeeper, and that is David Raya from Brentford. What do you make of that?
Morning all. Thanks for having me back. It's come as a real shock to, I think, all of us Arsenal fans, actually, because we all love Aaron Ramsdale. I thought we had a great season last year. It's not a complete shock, the rumour, because David Raya has been linked to Arsenal before. We know he's got history with our goalkeeping coach. But I think when it came to incomings, first and foremost, we've done so much business already. I think we were expecting outgoings to be the real topic of discussion. Here we are talking about incomings and talking about a goalkeeper. And, we know Matt Turner, the sort of questions about the competition for Aaron Ramsdale there. But I think we all thought that Aaron Ramsdale sort of had the number one sort of nailed, that he's, in a great position, having just signed the new contract. The fans love him. And David Raya is a top goalkeeper. And while we love the idea of having two really great goalkeepers fighting it out, I think you wonder, how does that dynamic work for the long term? So very interesting rumour. Definitely one that I think excites Arsenal fans. But like with a lot of Arteta's, targets and signings, it comes with questions, and good questions, real intrigue. I think we'd love to see how this all pans out. But let's see if we get it over the line first, because he's a really top goalkeeper. And I don't think he'll come cheap either.
And we know that Arsenal, they're interested in signing like a right-sided forward to provide backup stroke competition for Bukayo Saka. One of the names mentioned is Ajax's Mohamed Kudus. How much of a priority should that area be?
Probably a real priority, because look, anyone who comes in is going to have to work really hard to get that position from Bukayo Saka. He's brilliant, and he looked brilliant out on the tour. But we're 4 pre-season games in, and he started every single one. Whereas Martinelli and Trossard have alternated a little bit. We've seen Eddie lead the line for Jesus. So while there are options in the forward line, and by the way, I think it would take some outgoings as well before we could look at a player like Kudus. Bukayo Saka plays a lot of minutes in this Arsenal team, and maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. Arteta said that players need to get used to playing 60, 70 games a season, but he's a young player, and we depend on him a lot, Bukayo Saka. I can't help but think that a little bit of help isn't a bad thing, especially if it comes in the form of a player like Kudus, who is versatile, like a lot of Arteta's signings, someone who can lead the line, he could be a false nine, he could even play in midfield. So even if Saka is playing week in, week out, Kudus will get significant minutes elsewhere. So I'd love to see another right-sided forward come in. Again, is Kudus the only option? Maybe there's a few others out there. But I do think someone who can help Bukayo Saka and push him a little bit as well, that's never a bad thing, would certainly be a target. But like I said, we've got so many options as well. I think outgoings would have to come before we worry about another incoming in the forward line.
Well, I guess that would be the same for the Napoli winger, Kvaratskhelia. Kvaratskhelia, is he a player that you'd like to sign if you can get those outgoings? I suppose it would be him or Kudus, I suppose.
Yeah, it probably would be one or the other. Undoubtedly a talented player, undoubtedly a very talented player. But again, a lot of the forwards we've got that we've invested in very recently. I think Martinelli, top goal scorer last year. Reece Nelson just signed a new deal. Trossard joined in January. They're all left heavy. They prefer to play on the left-hand side. I'm no expert on Kvaratskhelia. If he can play out on the right, then maybe that is the depth and the option there. But again, what would he cost? And that kind of fee, is that just to add depth? I don't know. I've never seen Arsenal spend this kind of money on depth before, but then maybe that's what you need to compete with Manchester City. So don't get me wrong, I love to see Arsenal linked with these players, and I love to see them bringing them in as well. But I think sometimes you've got to wonder, is that the right balance for the squad? So look, undoubtedly talented player. I'm never going to complain about signing really good players, but I'm not sure he'd be a priority, if I'm honest.
So in terms of other areas that Arsenal might need to strengthen, are you content that everything is OK, or is there anything that maybe an area that hasn't really been mentioned that you think you could do with another player?
Well, I don't know, if I'm honest. I think this is the first time we're going into a season and there's no really obvious gap in the squad. The squad is, we were just out in the United States, and, we saw the 11 that started games and the 11 that finished, and that's not including the likes of Nelson and Zinchenko, who didn't touch the pitch in the United States. And it's a really big squad, and it's a very talented squad. So maybe depending on outgoings, a lot of people are calling for a striker, and I get that, because maybe you want someone who offers something different as a focal point, who's a little bit more of a traditional number 9, whatever that looks like. But Jesus looked brilliant on pre-season tour, and Balogun, who had a great loan. He's not really had an opportunity this pre-season. Apparently he's carrying an injury. So could he be the answer there? So I think there's still a lot of questions around other players that we're excited about, and maybe they will fill the void maybe we're missing, last season in the challenge, for the Premier League title with Man City. So let's see. I don't think there's a really obvious spot. I think outgoings will dictate a lot of what else we need to do in terms of incomings. But if there's not many more outgoings and this is all the business we've done in terms of incomings, I'd be pretty happy with that.
And for your expectations, you actually, you weren't far away from winning the title last season. What are your expectations this season?
Well, I think when you're in such a competitive league, and Man City are the treble winners, I think to expect to win a title, I don't know. I can never expect it, but I can certainly expect we challenge. I can always expect Arsenal to do their best to try and compete. They spent a lot of money, and I'd hope Arsenal can push Man City all the way and even closer, and hopefully win it, and certainly be competitive on all four fronts. I think that's one thing we have fallen short on a little bit in our race for top four a couple of years ago, our race for the Premier League title. We've sort of fallen away in other competitions, so it's to be competitive on all fronts. Like I've mentioned, we've got this squad, we can do that now, and push Man City further and hopefully win the league, because it's been a long time since we've done it, and what better time to do it than 20 years after the Invincibles. That's too long. It has been too long, but if you're going to wait that long, then this is the year to do it.
Great stuff, James. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks.
Now, we talked about David Raya a lot yesterday, in depth actually, but Olivia, could you see him going to any club as a number 2?
No. I'd be so surprised if he just accepted playing second fiddle behind Aaron Ramsdale. He was absolutely brilliant last season. He is just a brilliant goalkeeper. He made the most saves in the Premier League last season. I know sometimes that's hard to compare because obviously other teams have better defences, so goalkeepers will have less shots to save, but it obviously just shows how brilliant of a shot stopper he is. I know Matt Turner's been reported that he might be leaving Arsenal, maybe going on loan to Forest. So in my head, I'm thinking he must be being bought in to be competition for Aaron Ramsdale as number 1. I would just be so surprised if a goalkeeper of David Raya's calibre, a Spanish international, is coming to a club like Arsenal. I know Arsenal are obviously in all 4 competitions, but it would just surprise me if he's coming to Arsenal to play in the League Cup and the FA Cup. Surely not.
It's not the first time that they've done something like that, though. I remember when Ramsdale actually came in, Leno was the first team goalkeeper, and it did look like it was a bit interesting signing a first team goalkeeper for the price that he came for. But then he almost worked his way up into the first team, and then obviously his personality, you see all of these things. So I think with the type of player he is, I think both players might not be open to that happening, but at the same time, you have seen there's been unique situations in top teams. I remember Chelsea, for example, when Peter Cech and Courtois were both, fighting for that position. Cech was a bit older, so it was a bit of a different situation. So it could happen, and because they're in all these competitions, it could make sense, but at the same time, it would be interesting for that to happen again at Arsenal. But
you say both competitions, like literally, you would expect Aaron Ramsdale, if Raya's being bought in as a number 2, to play in the Premier League and the Champions League, leaving Raya to play in the FA Cup and the League Cup. And you never know, you might get City in the first round or third round of the FA Cup and go out. You just don't know. So then it's like, when is he actually going to play? I just think for a keeper that good, he needs to be playing every single week.
So Sam, just quickly, this winger that they're linked with from Napoli, can you tell us all about him, starting with his name?
Wow. Cavaschellia. Yeah, I think that was good. I think that was good.
Tom, you said it.
You said it really well. Yeah.
But I really wanted him to do it.
You know what it is? Every time I've seen this winger play, he's actually been incredible. He causes every defence problems. He played 43 times last season. He scored 14 goals, 17 assists. His relationship with Osimhen was a big reason why they won Serie A last season. He was just that player that he is so dangerous on the ball, and I think when you see him play, you can almost see why Mikel Arteta would be interested in a player like him. He's 22 years old. He's very direct, but at the same time, he plays a lot on the left. So I'm not really sure why he's linked with them, especially because his contract ends in 2027. So they're going to have to pay upwards of 100. Yeah. We know how Napoli are. They're very stubborn. We've seen the prices that they said for Osimhen as well. So I don't see it happening personally, but it's a good player to be linked with.
He's a great player to be linked with, but again, you're not going to be paying 100 million for someone to be a backup to Bukayo Saka. And if he was ever to move from Napoli, he's going to want assurances that he's going to be playing every week, not as a second option to either Martinelli, Trossard, those players that Arsenal already have. So I can't really. They're linked with him, but I can't really see it happening.
Arsenal are driving standards so high at the moment, but I worry a situation where you do potentially have 2 players competing for one place, that could end in tears, but especially when it comes to the goalkeeper situation. I just think when it comes to the dynamic of the team, and as Liv was saying there, you could be in a situation where one goalkeeper's not playing any football at all, and that is not good for the dressing room. And that is the concern. I understand Arsenal want to drive standards really high, but I think when you have 2 number 1s competing for one place, it never ends well and usually ends quite quickly. And it's going to end with one player ending up not happy at all. But Arsenal do want that right winger because, incredibly, Saka has played every game the last 2 Premier League seasons. Surely he can't keep that up. It's quite remarkable what he's done. You do want a competition for that place, but you don't want to be in a situation where you've got too much competition. But it does show all the indications from Arsenal, they're going all the way. They want to win that Premier League title, and all the moves they're making are pushing them towards that.
I love how Sam just changed it to that winger. Selfishly, I hope he doesn't come to the Premier League. Right, still to come on Good Morning Transfers, our attention turns to Chelsea. Will they sign a new goalkeeper, plus a new striker on the way too, potentially? Chelsea are in the market for a goalkeeper and are interested in Brighton's Robert Sanchez. One source claims an approach has been made and both a loan and permanent deal are under discussion. Chelsea are looking for a goalkeeper to provide competition for Kepa. Olivia, do they need a goalkeeper?
Yeah, I think so. I think Poch came out actually ahead of pre-season and said he was happy with Kepa going into the season with Kepa as Chelsea's number 1. You've got Marcus Bettinelli there, who was actually injured. He was Chelsea's 3rd choice keeper last season, but didn't go on their pre-season tour of America. Slanina did, the young American. He came on in Chelsea's last pre-season game, but I think after letting Edouard Mendy go to Saudi, I think there is a real need for a goalkeeper, like you say, to just rival Kepa for that number 1 spot. One of the names mentioned, of course, is Sanchez from Brighton. I really like him as a goalkeeper. What I like about him as well is his height. You know, he's out of favour at Brighton. He's 6'6" as well. Premier League experience. So, yeah, that's a name that Chelsea are linked with. I think he would be a good addition to that Chelsea squad.
And Sam, would he definitely be coming up in to provide competition, or would he actually be seen as a starter?
I think it depends on how Kepa starts the season. I think Pochettino, like Liv said, he's made it pretty clear that he wants to start him. He's played majority of the pre-season games. He's looked really good on the ball as well, and I think that's one of the main attributes that Poch wants from, you know, his goalkeeper. But I think Sanchez has every right to believe that he can come into the team and, you know, fight for his position. We saw it when Mendy was in the team, that they were going back and forth, and it also depended on which keeper was playing better. And I think in this situation where Brighton have signed a new keeper, they've made it pretty clear that he is now the 3rd choice. I think he just wants to be in a position where he's at least looked at as an option and as someone that can, you know, fight for that position. So yeah, I think he would be fighting for the spot. I don't think he'll walk in and be the starting keeper. I think that would be unfair to Kepa after the season that he had and the pre-season that he had. But yeah, we'll definitely fight for it.
But James, 6'6" Sanchez, but not bad with the ball at his feet, as you found out.
Yeah, he's got decent ability. I mean, we're quite lucky at Sky Sports. We get the opportunity to go and watch different sides train, and at Brighton in particular, they let you get very up close and personal. My experience was it was perhaps a bit too close. It was actually one of Roberto De Zerbi's first training sessions, and we'd filmed our stuff, and after a certain period of time, you get kicked out because they're going through their drills ahead of the last day. They don't want to give the team away. So I was walking off. The goalkeeper's going through their practice, and out of nowhere, a ball flew from 50 yards towards my feet, smashed the curb in front of me, and came up so I could catch it. And it was Robert Sanchez there with the grin on his face. So I'm not sure whether part of the plan was to smack me in the face with it, or that was what... It was a real test of my touch, wasn't it? But didn't quite make it to my feet. But it does show, like, he does have good ability, the ball at his feet. It didn't quite work out under Roberto De Zerbi, and towards the end of last season, he wasn't part of the matchday squad at times. He didn't want to be part of things, which is a shame considering the part he's played in Brighton's journey. But I think it works for both parties for him to move on now, especially if Brighton get a good fee. But I personally think that he'd be in there to compete with Kepa for that number 1 shirt.
Well, there are several reports in several outlets, actually, overnight suggesting that Levi Colwill is on the verge of signing a new 6-year deal at Chelsea. Olivia, how well would this news be received by Chelsea fans?
Yeah, incredibly. I think Chelsea fans will actually just be glad now that the speculation is coming to an end. And I think this news, I know it's a deal in principle for a new contract, but it will be as big as any signing Chelsea make this summer. He showed his class at Brighton at the under-21 Euros as well. They say never fall in love with a lone player, but Brighton fans just couldn't help themselves because he was just so brilliant for them. I said in pre-season that he would start every Premier League game for Chelsea. I still believe he'll start every Premier League game for Chelsea, and I think it will be the right-sided centre-back that will be changed a lot more, because Thiago Silva is, of course, nearly 39. I think all he wanted was assurances over his playing time, and Mauricio Pochettino has obviously given him that for him to agree this new contract. He's just 20 years old. I think it's scary how good he is, scary how good he can get. And also, I think it would really surprise me if he wasn't at least in Gareth Southgate's plans for the Euros next year, if not even starting, potentially next to John Stones for England.
So, Sam, he's a youngster who the Chelsea fans might not have seen that much of, but it seems like there is a lot of joy about this potentially happening.
Yeah, because I think a lot of Chelsea fans have followed his journey. You know, they thought it was kind of harsh that he wasn't given the opportunity last year when he came off the back of a loan from Huddersfield. People thought that he was going to be in the Chelsea squad around then, and then he went on loan to Brighton. He wasn't starting the first few games, and then he got into the squad and he's kept his position. And I think, like Pochettino has said during pre-season, he can arguably be one of the best centre-backs for years to come. He's only 20 years old, but when you see him play, there doesn't look like there's a thing that he can't do. He looks like he's good at everything. He's going to grow so much next to Thiago Silva, who's obviously helped a lot of the youngsters at Chelsea as well. And he plays with that maturity that, you know, you'd want to see from a centre-back. So I think a lot of Chelsea fans are obviously excited. Liverpool were keen on signing him. They were looking for a long-term replacement for their new captain, Van Dijk. So yeah, it's great for Chelsea fans. I know a lot of them have said that this is, you know, basically a sign. And even though he was a Chelsea player, but because there was so much speculation, they didn't know what was going to happen. So yeah, this is good for them.
Well, no, Sky Italy reporter brilliantly, Gianluca Di Marzio tweeted last night that Chelsea are open to the possibility of a swap deal between Romelu Lukaku and Dusan Vlahovic with Juventus. James, does it feel like this is now the time for Romelu Lukaku to part company with Chelsea?
It does feel like the right time. I mean, I'm still scratching my head about how this didn't work out and how it failed so quickly with Lukaku and his return to Chelsea, joining 10 years after he first joined the club. It felt like a magical return. It felt like it was the missing piece in the jigsaw for Chelsea, despite the fact they had already just won the Champions League. Goal scoring was still such a massive issue the season before he joined, and he had that incredible second debut at the Emirates, didn't he, when he scored, created a goal as well, and you just thought that Chelsea were destined to do something special that season, but it fell apart so quickly. And after just 5 months, he gave that interview to Sky Italy where he seemed to criticise Thomas Tuchel's tactics and suggest that he already wanted to move back to Inter Milan. So I think it's incredible to think it didn't work out, and I think both the club and Lukaku have to share the blame for it. But I think it's time to get rid. I don't think Pochettino would have spent too much time thinking about integrating him in the side, because I think he just simply doesn't want to be at Chelsea.
How sad is it, Sam, that after that good start in his second spell, that it hasn't worked out? Because it just hasn't.
Yeah, it's really sad, because I think at the time, like James said, when he was signed, everyone thought, universally in the world of football, that this would mean that Chelsea are going to be, you know, challenging for the title. You know, you just won the Champions League. It was clear that you need to score goals, and signing a striker that scored over 20 goals for Inter, it made a lot of sense for them to sign him. But then, you know, as the season started going along, you could almost see his frustration. You know, the team wasn't necessarily playing to his strengths, and he openly was frustrated about it, did the interview, and he never really found his way back into the team. Even though he scored, I think it was the Club World Cup, he scored in that final, but you could always see, you know, the celebration wasn't the same. He wanted to go back to Inter, went back to Inter now, and even after that, there were still Chelsea fans saying that, you know what, if it all works out over there, then maybe he could come back and start life afresh. And then he made it pretty clear that he wanted to stay at Inter Milan, and that's the team that he loves. And now it's not happening that way either. So it's just a tough and sad situation, because you never really want a player of that quality to, you know, be in a situation where his parent club don't necessarily want him and have replaced him with a striker like Jackson that is, you know, is comfortable. Inter Milan have now moved on from him and don't really know what's happening with Juventus.
Well, there are no active talks at present with Brighton over the signing of Moise Caicedo. This has been going on for a while, but he remains Chelsea's primary target. We are told Chelsea will go back in with an improved offer. Their last bid was worth £80 million. It was rejected because Brighton are valuing him at close to £100 million. And then there's Axel Disasi, expected to have a Chelsea medical this week after the club agreed a £38.6 million deal with Monaco. Some reports suggesting it's taking place today. Do Chelsea need a centre-back, Olivia?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think the options at centre-back were light, especially with Wesley Fofana basically being ruled out for the whole of next season. Thiago Silva, as brilliant as he is 39 in September. He's not going to be playing every single week. He's a brilliant centre-back. He's an experienced centre-back. He played a lot for Monaco last season, over the last 3 years, basically, since he signed for them. Also featured for France at the World Cup. And it is extra competition, and I do think Chelsea need that. However, what does this mean for someone like Trevor Chalobah, who is slotted in wherever the manager has asked to play him, whether it be in his favourite position, whether it have been out of position? I know he had a few shaky performances here and there, but overall I thought he's done a brilliant job when he's come in at centre-back or right-back. I think Trevor probably knows himself. He's probably was never going to be first-choice centre-back with Colwill, Thiago Silva and Badiashile. But what does this signing of Disasi then mean for someone like Trevor Chalobah? I know it's been reported that now he is probably looking for a move away, which is disappointing because I think he could have done a job as Chelsea's fourth or fifth choice centre-back. But yeah, I think they did probably need a centre-back, but it's bittersweet, I think, when it comes at perhaps the expense of someone like Trevor Chalobah.
There's loads going on at Chelsea because they are finalising a deal with Rennes worth £23.5 million for midfielder Leslie Okuchogwu. He's completed his medical, agreed personal terms and a long-term contract. There's another one for Chelsea. Let's have a look at how Chelsea might line up next season, all right? Because this is with players that they have been linked with. This is the current squad they've got without any of these deals we're talking about going through, and this is the squad that you've all picked. Talk us through it. The team you've all picked.
Yeah, I think there's not really that many shocks in the team. You know, Kepa in goal, Thiago Silva, the most experienced centre back. You know, James and Chilwell, now that they're back fit, that it seems like they're going to be the starters as well. Colwill with the new contract that is going to be signed very soon. He's going to slot in. Enzo, a player that came in January and looked very comfortable, and Santos next to him. I think that's probably one of the bright sparks that a lot of Chelsea fans have seen from this pre-season. He's a very young midfielder. He had a few issues with his permit when he signed in January, but now we've seen him in pre-season. We've seen the quality that you can have next to Enzo, plays above his years, and then Nkunku through the middle, who could probably play in any of those positions. Yeah. In the front four. Then Mudryk, who looks really confident this pre-season. Madueke, who's currently out injured, hasn't been able to play as many pre-season games, but he did look pretty good when he was playing for Chelsea. And then Jackson probably looks like one of the brightest sparks out of all the signings that we've seen from Chelsea in the last few windows. Yeah,
and of course, Caicedo, if he comes in, would fit into that side, no doubt whatsoever. Right, OK, coming up on Good Morning Transfers, sorry. We're talking Manchester United, Liverpool, Fulham and Everton. Don't go anywhere. Some big stories going on at the moment. Let's get through as many as we can between now and 10 o'clock. With Manchester United finalising their £72 million deal to sign the striker Rasmus Hojland from Atalanta. Right, James, how close is this?
Looks like he's getting very close. United hoping to have a medical done this week and for Hojland to formalise will be a 5-year contract plus a year option, and they want to do it in time for him to feature in one of the pre-season matches. United playing on both Saturday and Sunday, so they're hoping that he could be available to play in one of those. And the deal worth around £64 million plus £8 million in performance add-ons.
Right, so that's Rasmus Hojland on his way to Old Trafford. At Anfield, midfielder Fabinho has gone. He's completed a £40 million move to Saudi Pro League side Al Ittihad. The Brazilian international signed a 3-year deal. Olivia, how important is it that Liverpool replace him and just strengthen that midfield in general?
Yeah, I think so. I think we said last season they were light in midfield, and I think the drop-off in performances for someone of Fabinho's level from the season before last to last was pretty clear to see. With Jordan Henderson now gone as well, I think it was a priority for Liverpool this season. They've got that money for Fabinho as well, which means they might be able to up their bid for Romeo Lavia. Obviously, they've had that one bid rejected for 40 million, and I think Lavia would be a perfect, not perhaps replacement, because I don't think signing Romeo Lavia on his own is enough for that Liverpool midfield. I know they've got, Szoboszlai, McAllister, Harvey Elliott. I mean, Thiago's injured a fair bit of every season pretty much, but so I don't think in isolation Lavia is enough, but I think he would be an absolutely brilliant addition to that Liverpool midfield, and that Liverpool midfield is still the priority, I think, for Liverpool.
Yeah, I think Liverpool have a It's an interesting spot because I've said on other shows that you could tell that they were preparing their season for Fabinho to be their number 6. But I think now that he's leaving, it's put them in a little bit of a tough spot because they don't have that experience of players that have, challenged for the leagues under Klopp and challenged for the Champions League. When they signed Fabinho, that was a player that had just won a league title. He'd played in Europe as well. Lavia has just come from Southampton. It's a completely different situation. He's going to have to do a lot to, get embedded into that side and Klopp is a demanding manager. It might be too much for him. It might take him a few months. So I'll be interested to see if they're linked with any other midfielder from the Premier League.
Well, West Ham United are expected to go back in with an improved offer for the Southampton captain, James Ward-Prowse. They've had a bid worth £20 million rejected earlier this month. West Ham are encouraged by the player being open to the move, but still there's work to be done if they're to meet Southampton's valuation. West Ham expected to reject Inter Milan's bid, by the way, for Scamacca. That's a €20 million bid. We'll get to that in a moment. But Sam, will West Ham fans be worried that West Ham haven't actually got a midfielder in yet?
Yeah, I think they'll be worried. I think it's normal to be worried at this point. The season starts next week. You've just lost your captain. You've lost your best midfielder, your best player. So it's a lot to replace. But at the same time, you can't say that West Ham aren't trying. We've seen that they've tried to sign McTominay. They're in conversations with Ward-Prowse, Gallagher as well. And these are players that are coming from, that have got Premier League experience, coming from top clubs as well. And it's going to be difficult when people know that, they have the Rice money and a lot of teams are trying to, get the valuations that they want for these players. So it's going to be difficult, but I believe that they're going to get a DM and someone that can replace what Rice done for the team.
Do they need, James, with that Scamacca, whether they agree a deal or not, do they need a striker regardless?
It's a difficult one. Danny Ings didn't have the season that he'd have wanted last year. He only started 15 times in the Premier League, and it was Mikel Antonio who was favoured more in the second half of the season while they were trying to stave off relegation and fight in the Europa Conference League, which they did so brilliantly in the end. But he was linked with a move to the Saudi Pro League. That has gone cold at the moment. I'd like to see Scamacca get an opportunity at West Ham. When I did watch him in games, and you watch him play for Italy, I think he is the full package. He can do pretty much everything. So much size, so physical, got brilliant ability with the ball at his feet as well. But I think with West Ham fighting now in the Europa League and the Premier League, and they want to have a much better season this year, I think the question mark has been 2 years ago they didn't have that squad depth, which meant they ran out of steam chasing top 4 football. Last season the squad was perhaps too big, so I think David Moyes is a case of getting the right balance in terms of enough numbers but not too many.
Well, Fulham have a verbal agreement with Everton to sign Damari Gray. However, the winger won't be allowed to leave Goodison Park until Sean Dyche has added some extra bodies to his squad. Marco Silva has made Gray one of his top summer targets. So, James, why are they so keen and why would Everton let him go?
Well, Fulham are keen because Mana Soliman went to Spurs. He had a brilliant loan spell last year at Fulham, showed his potential, scored a number of goals. So there is a gap in the squad there. Willian signed a new contract, but he did incredibly well. But I don't think he can do the same again this season and reproduce that form. But also Everton, they're balancing financial fair play constraints and they have agreed a deal with Sporting Lisbon for their striker Yusuf Chamiti. Still work to be done. Personal terms still to be agreed with a 19-year-old. Dominic Calvert-Lewin's not played in pre-season. They haven't scored many goals in the last couple of years, 34 goals in 38 Premier League games. So they need goals, but they also need to bring some money in as well.
Yeah, they do. OK, we're back for Transfer Talk shortly, but Good Morning Transfers returns at 10 a.m. Oh, no, 9 a.m. till 10 a.m, sorry, tomorrow. Transfer Talk's back in 2 hours' time today at midday. And there's transfer shows as well. I think it's Dharma Sheth and Michael Bridge at 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. Coming up, lots to look forward to. We're building up to England's final group match of the World Cup against China. They haven't conceded yet. Can they make it 3 wins from 3?